We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the Halting Winter podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the Halting Winter podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Jesse Tighe, City Administrator in West Bend, Wisconsin. Jesse, welcome to the podcast. It is great to have you on today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. We were kind of talking beforehand where I've never really been a podcast guy until you had reached out and, let me check and see what this is all about and listen to a handful of your episodes. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to have the chat today.
Well, before you know it, this will be the first of many, and then probably you'll be Joe Rogan by the end of the year, right? You'll have your own podcast and 3-hour sessions. Oh, I love it. It's going to be great. Well, I just had Steve Volkert on. I think his episode is now already aired by the time yours will air. And WCMA president, and looking forward to coming out in there to the WCMA Winter Conference here in just a few weeks and freezing. I think it's cold here in Seattle. I don't know what cold is. I'm sure Wisconsin's feeling it right now.
It's a little chilly. Winter's for real right now. And born and raised Wisconsin, winter doesn't really bother me, but when you really can't go outside and enjoy it, there I start getting to be a little cranky about it. But no, it's I appreciate everything about being born and raised in Wisconsin. And I've traveled out to the Pacific Northwest. I really dig the Seattle area. Had some family vacations out there. But yeah, I'm definitely a Midwest kind of guy.
I feel you. It's gorgeous out here. Again, it is the best place on earth. End of July, August, especially even into September. But the rest of that, the dreary and the misty, and we have to put up with a lot. And so, but you at least get the sun while it's cold. But I want to unpack all about growing up in Wisconsin, what it's like, and what the childhood that you had and how it kind of shaped where you're at today. So let's do what we do here on the Halting Winter podcast. Take us back to the beginning, Jesse. Help us get to know you, the person. Tell us about where you were born and kind of the town that shaped you.
Absolutely. I grew up in a rural area between Green Bay and Door County, a little town of Luxembourg, Wisconsin. We lived out in the countryside. My mom raised dogs, so we wanted to be out and away from folks. She showed them quite a bit, and I traveled with her quite a bit as a kid, participating in that. So I saw a lot of things, did a lot of things, really got out and about, so to speak, and enjoyed a lot of that. Fast forward, I got into high school sports. And so I really was more grounded at home. As any good Gen X kid, I was given marching orders, thou shalt go to college. Neither of my parents did. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? Where should I go? What should I do? Figure it out. So thankfully, with the help of my high school guidance counselor and stuff, I started getting some ideas. And I landed at Carroll College, now Carroll University in Waukesha, where it was a small university. Coming from a small high school, I appreciated that. aspect of it where I could get that one-on-one attention when and if I needed it. And I was far enough away from home, about 2.5 hours, but still close enough I could get back. So that was really great. Appreciated my time at Carroll. And I went to school to be an environmental science major. I wanted to be a DNR game warden. Being a country kid playing outside all the time, I wanted to get a job out in the woods. I thought that would be great. Well, I married a city girl. Really starting to think about staying in the southeastern Wisconsin area. And right out of school, I took a position, my undergraduate took a position as a land use specialist, basically a zoning code officer, if you will, with Dodge County. So I was tasked with working with not only county codes, but also in conjunction with the Department of Natural Resources on water setbacks and floodplain enforcement and whatnot. So I did inspections throughout the county. And little did I know, but that first job out of college as a young professional really would actually provide an excellent skill set as I got to administration later on down the road. And I'll touch on that in just a second. But I spent a couple of years in the code area. And then I kind of switched gears within Dodge County Planning and Development Department to land use planning. At that point in the early 2000s, there was a law here in Wisconsin called smart growth, or coined as smart growth, where required all municipalities have development plans. How are you going to grow? And how are you going to set forth your land uses within your community? So as at the county level, we would help some of the rural townships with these plans. So that was some great exposure to a couple of different, public presentations under the tutelage of my manager, and also just relying back on my zoning code days of understanding what these codes did and how they worked and how they then impacted, development into the future. Fast forward from there, a very similar job with the village of Brown Deer, where it combined code enforcement, but also land use planning. That was a planning and zoning specialist position. That's where I met Andy Peterson, one of your previous guests, whom I blame for getting me into public administration. But Andy served as the assistant village manager and the community development director, my boss in Brown Deer. He took the job in Bayside, and I happened to go home that evening, and I was chatting with my wife and saying how, yeah, my boss is moving on and this and that. So it'll be a change at work, and, kind of neat, opportunities, right? Change isn't always a bad thing. And all of a sudden my wife kind of looked at me and she's like, well, why don't you ask the manager to step into that position? You're nuts. No way. This doesn't make sense. And she's like, no, stop and think about it. You understand the community development department. You work in that department. So if you're supervising it, you understand what that department does and how it works. You can learn the administration side of things, and a little bit more of convincing and cajoling. And this is one of the many, many things I love about my wife, making me a better person. At the end of, by the time we were done with dinner, it was about, hey, I'm going to go have a conversation with the village manager, which I did the next day. And I worked up all the gumption I could to wander in there and basically say, hey, boss, I think it'd be cool if you'd promote me into that role. And here's why I think I'd be good at it. And from there, he's like, let me take it under consideration. So I'm kind of like, okay, yep, this isn't going to go anywhere. Well, later that day, he came down to my office and he's like, you know what, write me up a letter of interest. I don't need a resume. We've got that on file from, you coming on board as the planning and zoning specialist, but, really get into the why, why are you interested in this? And so I'm racking my brain, really trying to put together a fantastic letter. And I actually called Andy, who had left and is now in Bayside and still is. And he's like, stop and think about it, Jesse. You enjoy working with people. You enjoy the variety of, the land use developments and the zoning code enforcement. Take that times 100. That is public administration. You're working internally with people. You're working externally with people. The variety of topics you can cover in any given day is endless. And so I built out that letter of interest, spoke to the village manager again, and by the grace of it, I was promoted into the role of assistant village manager, community development director. So ridiculously long title to fit on a business card, by the way.
Right.
The condition of that was that I would go back to school and get a master's degree. That's where I attended Concordia in Mequon. And they had a flexible program where I could do nights and weekends. So that was an interesting balancing act for a couple of years where I'm learning this new job, getting into things, but then in the evening, going right to school, and then getting home and being part of that, being part of that dynamic as well. It worked out. It came together really well for me, thankfully. So then I spent some time in Brown Deer as the assistant, and the village manager really gave me the opportunity and exposed me to a lot in that any meeting, he's pulling me in. I had no real responsibility in that meeting other than maybe scribing some notes, but it was about listening and seeing and understanding. And if nothing else, making that connection where if he wasn't available, I could answer a phone call or I could go to the front counter. That sort of experience. And then as time went on, it became the special projects came on board and more responsibility. So I really had an opportunity to grow into what is administration, what it's about. um, from there, I started getting antsy. I wanted to see and get out, on my own, right? So I landed my first position as the village administrator was with the village of Butler. That was in the county next door, mile square community built out. Um, they were surrounded by other incorporated municipalities, but that was one of the most proud communities I've ever worked for. We are Butler. We're small, but we know who we are. We know what we want, the quality of life and the expectations. And frankly, as a first time administrator, I couldn't have asked for any more because everybody was very clear about what they wanted and what they expected. And the other beauty of being a first time administrator in a small organization like that, in a smaller community like that, is I like to joke, I was the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. I would be at front counter handling a dog license, taking tax payments, scheduling building inspections, HR, finance. I was also, by the letter of it, the clerk. So I would help with elections, obviously the budgeting and the policy setting as the administrator. So that was just a fantastic learning opportunity for me and growing opportunity for me as a professional. And from there, took a position as the assistant city administrator, human resources director in the city of Mequon. And I had a handful of folks ask, well, why are you moving backwards? You were the administrator. Why do you want to be the assistant? Well, I looked at it as a growth opportunity. As a professional, yes, by title, okay, technically I was going backwards, but it was a larger community. There was a larger staff. It was a different skill set as far as getting more in depth in human resources and larger and more in depth special projects, being a bigger community and a larger citizenry. And so it was almost like a rule of 10. It was 10 times bigger land wise. It was 10 times bigger from a budget standpoint, 10 times bigger as a population standpoint. So it was about just a larger scope of opportunity. And I served a short tenure, about 7, 8 months as acting city administrator during um, a transition time. I ended up being the bridesmaid to the recruitment process that they did. So then I just helped the new city administrator get up to speed, but I had that taste. I wanted to get back into the big chair, so to speak. I really appreciate that the buck stops on my desk. I'm maybe I'm a glutton, but I appreciate that responsibility and that role on behalf of wherever community I've been in. And so with that, I was very upfront with the city administrator. I'm like, you know what? I think it's time. I'm going to start checking around, looking around. Um, and I went over to Grafton as their village administrator. That was an interesting dynamic where I went to a smaller community. Once again, I'm the administrator. So I have the big chair, so to speak. But I followed a long tenured administrator. So there were plenty of folks saying, but that's not how we did it. And not that it was wrong or anything. It was just different. My style was different than that gentleman's style. And for the first week, it was kind of interesting where I like to kind of, I guess, manage by walking around. I want to check in with folks. I can only stare at a computer screen so long. And while I'd get up and walk around a little bit, and all of a sudden I was like, what do you want? Oh my gosh, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just coming out, checking in. How's it going? And a little over 9 years in Grafton, just was a great experience too. My family and I, we relocated up there. My wife changed jobs to a nearby school district. So it was an all in kind of deal. And my boys are still flourishing in the Grafton school district, but it has been a great move for our family and professionally speaking, which is always that delicate balance you try to strike. You want to grow as a professional, but yet you obviously have those at home responsibilities. And we struck that balance. It was great. And thankfully, again, I need to give kudos to my wife. She understands I'm going to get pulled anytime, any day, whether it's an emergency meeting or we have to spin up an emergency operations center or what have you. Bless her for all of her patience and dealing with my crazy schedule. So yes, 9 years in Grafton, and I am now, I think, coming up on a grand total of 6 months here in West Bend. So it's been a whirlwind, but yes, to the point of path, I came up through planning and zoning and land use development. I did not come straight through school. I went back, and it all has come together. And I'm loving it. I love the pace. I love the variety, and I'm really excited now being in a larger organization. That pace and variety has just exponentially expanded.
I love it. Okay, it's a great summary. Now let's dive back into the weeds. Let's go back to childhood. I want to hear more about first. You said your mom raised dogs. Do you have a
Yep.
favorite dog, or now are you like I grew up on a ranch, right? And so
Sure.
I am enjoying a season of pet free, zero pets, zero no. Like I did my service, I did my time, I did my hard time. So what's your favorite dog? Do you have a dog now? What was that like growing up in that environment?
We do have a dog now, and she is spoiled rotten. So growing up, anywhere between 6 and 16 dogs we would have in the house. I remember as a kid whelping puppies in the dining room. Helping mom give shots and things like that, helping groom, and obviously the cleanup aspect of it. That was all part of kind of the building the responsibility as a kid. Those were part of my chores, feeding, helping with feeding and whatnot. Um, and then, fast forward, I go away to school. We start our family, this and that. I was actually the big holdout. My wife and boys were like, "We want a dog." Nope. We want a dog. Nope. Finally, they did wear me down, and yes, not now we have a yellow lab who, like I said, is just a spoiled, rotten little brat in our house. But I am ridiculously happy that we do have a dog again. But for a long time, I was the holdout. I'm like, no, no, we're not doing this. I grew up in it, not doing it, but one's enough.
And that's the thing you learn. It's work. People don't realize. I know every kid's like they all want a dog, and then guess who takes care of it? Mom and dad have to feed it and walk it and do all that. But when you grow up in that, I mean, my big thing was we never took vacations when I was a kid, or
Oh, yeah.
rarely, because who's going to watch the farm? Who's going to feed all the animals? And there's a different. I would never. I have zero regrets. I think it's a great way to grow up on a farm, learning those lessons, because there's something unique about chores and responsibilities of living things, right? The taking out the trash and doing some chores is good, but when you're over a living thing that suffers consequences if you don't feed it and care for it and take it out, you sense that, right? If you don't walk a dog, it's going to tell you about it and it cause mayhem. So maybe talk about is your in your childhood, and again who you are now in service. What did maybe that play into? And then again, you mentioned you become an athlete. What was that like? I think there's something also special about being in a smaller town growing up, because I know I wasn't a great athlete by any means, but because my town was pretty small, I could play in anything and everything at a varsity level, and which I think it really shapes you to learn team dynamics and leadership dynamics in those kind of places. Maybe speak to that in your childhood and the shaping of that.
Growing up in Luxembourg, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Have a ton of friends to this day, and quite frankly, I don't get back as much as I would like to, but yet I can still go back home, and everybody's like, "Hey, how's it going?" It's like we don't really skip a beat, which is just I love that aspect of it. Going home, and that was all part of it. I appreciate the fact that traveling with my mom to the dog shows, I saw a lot, I did a lot, I helped out a lot. So, quite frankly, the notion of public service wasn't a thought of a career for me as I'm growing up, but just being in that small community where you always help your neighbor, you always help your friends. I think it was kind of built in indirectly, and how I've gotten here. But Yeah, I mean, growing up, I didn't know what a city manager was. I didn't know anything about local politics. There's some of the stories about within the township how when I was a wee lad, mind you, um, the town board was a lot of the old school farmers in the area who happen to be of Belgian heritage. So there's stories going around, and I've never confirmed this, but there's stories going around that their idea of having a closed session was simply switching over and just speaking Belgian to one another. And then when they were done making the decision, they'd switch back and close the meeting in English. Now, I've never confirmed that. That maybe just a tale that's made the rounds. But either way, it's just I knew where town hall was. I vaguely remember going in there with mom and dad when I was younger, watching them go in, pull the curtain, go in and vote, come back out. But again, the notion of local government, it carried no weight with me as a kid, or even when I got into my undergraduate in college. I was more focused on I wanted to be that DNR game warden. I want to be out in the woods. It wasn't about serving a community, but I think the notion of service does go back to my upbringing because in that small town, you are helping your friends, you are helping your neighbors. Traveling with my mom, we're helping her friends with their dogs, that kind of thing. Helping out on my godfather's farm. It was always just understood you helped.
There's something genuinely exciting happening in local government right now. I'm seeing cities and counties use artificial intelligence in some genuinely impressive ways, both inside their organizations and out in their communities. What stands out is how practical these tools have become. It's less about headlines and it's more about really helping people do their jobs with a little more ease and a bit more focus. And that's what I appreciate about Tyler Technologies and their unique approach to AI. They're helping organizations like yours remove friction, taking repetitive, time draining tasks off your staff plates, improving how residents engage with their local government, and giving teams more space to focus on the work only humans can and should be doing. There's no hype. There's no shortcuts. It's just helpful solutions built for the realities of local government. If you're headed to the National Association of Counties Legislative Conference, I want to encourage you to take a few minutes to connect with the Tyler team and hear real examples from counties across the country using AI in helpful, practical ways. If you're not heading to DC, you can explore Tyler's free plain language AI resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. Again, free downloads, free tools, just amazing insights to help you truly understand artificial intelligence in a way that's practical and helpful for your specific local government context. tylertech.com/winter. Now, back to the conversation. Yeah. It's one of the things I talked about with Steve is internships. And like what you said, you didn't really know, you're kind of told to go to college, trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to study? And talk about maybe, you said game warden, obviously you must have had some experience or knowledge of that role because you were outside. Did you ever encounter a game warden? Was there any influence there? And I bring that up to say this is one of the reasons if so many city managers, city administrators, like your story today, you had no idea what local government, what a city manager was. If we don't reach out into our high schools and into colleges and do a better job of informing them what we do, what's going on, I think that we're missing out on some real talent and really the pipeline. I'm concerned that there's many people retiring, and it's like you kind of look around and I'm looking at MPA programs that are struggling to find people, struggling for students. And it's like, what are we going to do? How do we, and experience is the key. I think it's usually the experiences, not just the knowledge of something, but the experience, the hands-on, like, this was so cool. I saw this and I saw that there was a connection. Tell us about what that was with game warden and kind of what that.
For me, it was when I went through the hunter safety class as a kid. My dad was a deer hunter, and I wanted to go with dad and do that. And by state law, right, you need to go through the class, get your license, and this and that. And there were a couple of sessions where wardens came in and spoke to what the regulations were, what firearm safety was all about. And then to close out the class, we actually went to the local sportsman's club, did some sporting clays, And it was about, really understanding as a kid the safety aspect of that. And it was that interaction with those wardens and the instruction um, and I guess just the outreach, and I guess being a kid too and seeing somebody in a uniform, like, oh my goodness, that seems like something really cool. And your job is outside. That is amazing. I want to do that. So that's kind of how that connection came about. But yeah, also too, just kind of my upbringing, as any good Gen X kid, I was go outside. We'll let you back in when the sun comes down kind of thing. So go play.
That's right. So you're at Carroll University, you're studying environmental science, and I love this too. You get done with the degree and you're kind of like, okay, what am I doing now? Was there, well, you said that was it. You met your wife and she's like, I'm not interested in living out in Timbuktu in some game warden, cabin in the middle of nowhere. And so it kind of changes, again, the people you meet and the things you experience change your trajectory. And so when you become a land use administrator, this kind of first job in Dodge County, I think one of the things I like to do too is to try to take apart the or lower the expectations or the assumptions that young people have. Well, I got an environmental science degree, or I got some random underwater basket weaving degree. I can't do local government. I don't have. When you see sometimes I think the titles sometimes of local government, they really turn people off in the way of when I see land use administrator. That sounds complicated. That sounds very particular and specific. And I have no training in land use or administration. What does environmental science have to do with that? And so I think sometimes even the way we do job postings or even internship postings, it can actually get in the minds of people to go, it's not me. I don't connect with anything I just read there. And so maybe speak to how unprepared you felt, but what was that like working for Dodge County? And what was the training like to even help you be able to fulfill that role?
Sure. I actually ended up applying for the job. So I'll show my age a little bit. I saw the ad in the classifieds. But the reason I actually ended up applying for that is because an article I'd read earlier in the week talked about at that time, there was a statewide hiring freeze. None of the state agencies were hiring. So, well, what am I going to do? That was my game plan. I was going to go apply to the DNR, Department of Natural Resources. What am I going to do? And here they're in this huge freeze. So I'm just combing. What can I do? What are my options? And interesting enough, I came down to three options. My first would be what can I find in the classifieds, right? That's related to what I'm doing. Otherwise, okay, I'll move back home for a short time. I knew I didn't want it to be a permanent thing, but I could possibly go to tech school, become a firefighter. That always kind of interested me as well. Or frankly, I was seriously considering joining the service. I thought the Air Force was super cool as a kid. And I'm like, okay, that's another path. At that decision making juncture in my life in my early 20s, okay, I've got these are my three options. This is what I'm going to explore. But yeah, frankly, I was kind of heartbroken when I had saw that statewide hiring freeze. What am I going to do? So then I see the classified ad for the land use administrator, and no, it was exactly right. I read the classified ad, and mind you, it was a tiny little summary, and not a chance, not a chance. I get my resume together. I go buy my first cheap suit. So I get all dolled up, and I go for the interview. And I thought I did pretty well, but I didn't hear anything back. And graduation is creeping a little bit closer and closer. Then I get the phone call. Hey, would you want to come on board, be a land use administrator with us here in Dodge County? I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. This is great. Absolutely. Yes. I jump at it. Well, fast forward a couple of years, I come to find out I was the only one that wanted to take that starting wage rate. So that goes back to my time and place kind of thing. I wasn't too proud. I was ecstatic. I was out in the workforce. I was out doing the things. And being a land use administrator, I was doing inspections. So I was out in the field. So I was still in that vein of being able to be outside quite a bit. 75 and sunny, beautiful job. Day like today, late January in Wisconsin, not so much a beautiful job. But with that, it came into the people skills and the presentation skills because you're working with folks that are just ecstatic. They're building their first house. They're getting this permit. They're super excited, very gracious, very thankful. Then you get the folks that no, you can't build this. It doesn't comply with codes. Um, As a young professional, Monday morning, 8:02 a.m., I'm being called a communist with a few adjectives wrapped around that because I had to explain why a permit was denied. So that little bit of thick skin that you develop dealing with some of those folks, but also working through de-escalating and getting to the facts and the root of a situation, all of that really is built into where I am today. So you can't necessarily draw a direct connection, but a lot of these nuanced skills within the jobs I have had have really built to where I am today. So yes, as a land use administrator, it was great because again, I was still outside and interacting with folks, and it just built to where I was. And then moving over into the planning role, that really built out that public presentation side of, as an administrator, sometimes you have to get up at a ribbon cutting and say a few words or make presentations at the council level. Um, so all of that initial first job experience, will not directly tied to the skill set today. The underlying skills really have rolled up to get me where I am today.
It sounds like that land use administration position gave you really the full spectrum experience of local gov, right? You get the hopes and dreams of people building their first house and being like, man, I'm helping do, like, you see the impact of your role. And then you also get just the trash, like communist who, you can't tell me what to do. I bought this property. And it's just like, oh my gosh, you get it both. Maybe real quick, when you become a planner, again, a planner too, what is a planner? Like, we use these terms. And so, how did you feel? Again, when I think of planning, I think of like, you need an engineering degree. You need like, I'm sure there's classes. Like, I think about degrees. I think that's one of the beautiful things of local gov is it has its own training. It has associations. It has networking that you can learn these things. You're not expected to come into local gov and you can't know it all. There's too much to know. And so how prepared did you feel? And then what was that like coming into that side of the work?
Sure. When I made that switch, it was about just looking for an opportunity to continue to grow and do different things, and expand my options looking forward. And thankfully, I had a planning manager who was willing to take that shot in, okay, yeah, you can lateral transfer over from this enforcement side into this planning side of the house. And he really helped me walk through and understand, what is that smart growth law? Because that was a lot of our responsibility with that. What is it? How do these plans take shape? What are the questions to ask and the conversations to have with our clients who, being in Dodge County, it was the townships mostly that would contract with the county for the planning services. How do you have those conversations and how do you find their priorities? And then how do you put that and translate that into a compliant land use plan? So that was a really great growing opportunity too, because that took the communication aspect and presentation aspect of being a professional up another level and another notch. So yes, I had some general coursework in land use planning. I understood what it was. I understood some of the concepts behind it, but really to get in and do it, that was on the job training. And I had a pretty gracious mentor who was willing to take the time and walk me through it and have me part of the process. So I appreciate that opportunity to, continue my growth.
I love it. Then when you go to the next stop is Village of Brown Deer, planning and zoning specialist. Maybe the question I would have that I think would be interesting is you've been land use out, connecting in the public. You've been planning behind the scenes, now planning and zoning. You're getting to learn really the realities of local gov, all these kind of things that, again, the whole idea of local gov, it's not that we need policy for policy's sake. All these are supposed to serve a community, because if you just have book of judges and let everyone do whatever the heck they want, it's total chaos. Like, no one would live in that kind of town. And especially as things grow, there has to be organization. What kind of appreciation did you have as you now, again, game warden seems to be, it seems like we've made a change now. This is what we're in. This is what we're enjoying. Talk about what you did there at the Village of Brown Deer as before you get to the assistant village manager position, and maybe give us some insight into zoning.
I'm coming from very rural Dodge County with zoning code and water setbacks and things like that, to a first ring suburb of Milwaukee. We are right there. It is urbanized. Now, there's a small waterway that comes through. The Milwaukee River comes through as well. So there's a little bit of that floodplain and water setback that I had been dealing with, but it really wasn't a factor. It was such a different dynamic, and being going from the county level to the local village municipal level, that got me so much more engaged with folks too, because you're not this big nebulous county entity anymore. You are the village. You are right there. Somebody comes in the village hall, you're going to the counter and answering the questions. You're at the meeting, you're in front of these folks that you will see out on the street any day at any point. Um, so I actually liked that aspect of it, where it was more of a direct connect, if you will. And it was about learning the nuances of an urban setting, but also too, Brown Deer is one of the North Shore communities of Milwaukee County where they collaborate a lot. And that started getting me understanding, okay, I can work with, maybe it's Milwaukee County, maybe it's the next door village next door, or one of the North Shore communities, or within already established collaborations. Just such a different dynamic, and there were so many more interconnections and frankly personal connections, because again, you were in that village setting, not the large scale high level county setting. And so I really came to appreciate that level, if you will, as far as interaction and roles and responsibilities.
I love it. I love it. And so you mentioned Andy Peterson again. You can go back and listen to his episode. He was on a few weeks ago. Great guy. He leaves to go to Bayside, where he's at still to this day. And then you have this whole, I love that you highlight your wife's like, well, why can't it be you? And then by the end of dinner, you're like, it is me. And you go off and start, have this conversation. And I love that too. You're never, I think that's one of the biggest themes that resonates throughout this podcast with leaders is I said yes. I didn't get in my head. I didn't say no. I saw an opportunity. I took a risk and said yes. And if I can encourage one thing to young people specifically, but really anyone who desires to be of more impact and leadership, just say yes. You don't have to have all the knowledge. You're never going to be fully prepared. You're always going to be, that imposter syndrome is always going to be right there. Just say yes and step in. And guess what? No one really knows what we're doing. We're all winging it to some extent. So when you took that position, and now again, you've been a specialist, right? You've been land use planning. I mean, your title, planning zoning specialist. Like, it's one thing I'm sure that you felt like, I know this, like, let's go. When you now are assistant village manager, community services director, what was it like remembering back to be in that seat for the first time? Again, you're not the village administrator. We're going to get to that, but still, now you get to see all the parts of the fleet, right? And that's why I say cities have so many departments, so much going on, so much things are trying to collaborate and create and so many opportunities for silos. What was it like to be in that and really see the totality of a city?
It was really a neat transition because, while I had this crazy job title, so I'm overseeing a department, but also some of the duties that I had assigned to me were I was that frontline help desk person. So I'm trying to figure out how IT works. Updating the server, that scared me, but that was part of it. I worked and I oversaw the building maintenance side of things. So I remember going to the local hardware store with the maintenance guy to get new supplies for Village Hall. So it was interesting from that aspect, a whole new realm of responsibilities, but also that role change where, by the letter of it, as the assistant village manager, in the absence of the manager, I was the guy in charge. So I went from peer to supervisor, not fully, but that kind of that half step. So that dynamic and experiencing that for the first time was kind of unique too, where especially within the community development department, where I was a member of the department, now all of a sudden I'm the supervisor of that department, and just working through. And I think this all comes back to growing as an administrator. It's part of that learning curve, right? I'd ask my dad, help me understand, you ran a meat department in a local grocery store, talk to me about management. He's like, Jess, it was a different time, different place. Things I do or say, you can't. And I'm like, okay, I appreciate that. He's like, I could walk people outside, say, hey, please get your act together. or you can leave and I would come in, then they could come in and either keep going or not. You have to work it through. You have to have those uncomfortable conversations. So, well, I appreciate the fact that dad couldn't really give me a hard and fast piece of advice, just that guidance and be willing to have the conversations. Be firm in your convictions and your expectations, but understand stuff happens. There are things that are outside of anyone's control where that end target, you may not get there today. You may have to get there tomorrow and be willing to adjust and understand that. We are all people here. We are all doing the best we can. So basically, don't be a jerk. Lead, set your priorities, establish your expectations, but be nice to people about it. And that I really appreciated from guidance from my dad on that side of things. But that was such an interesting change though from peer to supervisor, and it was all part of that growth. And I guess to your point of how do we get folks willing to say yes or willing to take that chance? I would actually add to that and challenge my peers. If you have folks on your staff that are engaged, that are rock stars, that are, you can tell they're looking for more, have the conversation. You know, what would you think about maybe moving into this role as an assistant administrator or something to that effect? And I'll use myself as the example. Getting into Grafton after I had gotten in and gotten established as an administrator, we I actually went down that path with one of the team members that she was engaged. She was a rock star employee. She kind of asked about public administration, but wasn't totally sure. And we talked about it and moved her into a role of assistant village administrator, community development director. I kind of modeled it after what I did in Brown Deer, really to get her into that career path of public administration because there was a bit of interest there. There was a spark, but more so just being a rock star employee and how can I move her forward and provide opportunity. So I would put that challenge out there where it goes both ways. I think, folks, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Don't be afraid to ask the question because the answer is always going to be no unless you ask. But then from the folks that are in the seats, take a look around. If there's opportunities that present themselves, have that conversation with those folks. Be a little bit more proactive, I would say.
I love this. And this ties into, again, where you're going to go. You're going to go to the village of Butler, then McQuan, and then Grafton, and now West Bend. So maybe highlight this because I think this will be great for the audience on both people rising up, but also people in positions of leadership. And that's what I talk about ownership. In fact, you're going to go to the village of Butler, and you said you wear all the hats because it's small and it's not like you have a huge staff. You've got to, you can got to be schizophrenic wearing all those hats. And the issue, I think a lot of people will start in a small place and then they get maybe their trajectories, they continue to be either they'll move on to bigger places or the city will grow itself. I know city managers in South Carolina whose cities doubled in the last just handful of years, just crazy growth. And then your staff increases. I think Sean Bell, I think his staff has doubled in just a handful of years. And so in light of that, though, one of the things is a leader I would expect to in city management, village administration, you have a responsibility because you have what I call you're on the tightrope of municipal leadership and you have the three-headed snake. You have your staff of people, and right, you have departments, and you're always trying to work to bring collaboration instead of conflict, but you also have council electeds, and they all have different opinions and different desires. And then you have community residents, and they all have different opinions and different desires. And so you're navigating all these things. So the responsibility, and the temptation can be like, I'll empower people, but I really won't give away ownership because the buck stops with me and I got to make sure I know everything. And so, you know what I mean? Like ownership's kind of fake. It's not really real to hand it off to people so they can feel the way and do it their way. What has that journey been like for you in these different positions, in these different places to feel the weight of all the hats, but also how have you practiced then giving away true ownership so people can soar and find themselves and really grow into their own?
Well, I will say this. I'm not yet great at delegation. I am slowly getting better. Um, Inherently, I've always had the trust in staff. I make it abundantly clear where whatever organization I've been in, I am not here to be the fire chief. I am not here to drive the snow plows. I am not here to run the police department. No. You guys are professionals in your field. I trust what you're doing, but it is about getting that line of communication and trust and credibility built between both ways. One, I want and I need full candid communication up, but also I let them know they can expect my support. They can expect, make sure I know what's going on, but you will have my support. I have your back. And that is important for any leader of any organization, for their folks to understand that they're supported. I think it's also important for leaders to make sure to break through or work through the notion of anybody trying to say I'm more important than the other within the organization, because no, it's all an organization, it's a team, and you have to move forward as such. And I think that aha moment for me really happened a few years ago at a student government day. So I'm giving my presentation. I'm explaining about municipal work, not just administration. About you could go to work for a municipality. You could be a chemist in a utility. You could be an accountant. You could be a truck driver. You could be an inspector. You could be, any myriad of things, all within the municipal realm, right? And that notion of public service and what it's about. And I had one kiddo raise their hand and ask the question, "Who's the most important employee in the village?" And I was working for the village of Grafton at the time. And first of all, being a sixth grader, that was kind of a profound question, right? And it kind of stepped me back for a second, but I thought about it and I'm like, that depends. And all of a sudden, they all kind of look at me and, well, if a house is on fire, the firefighter is the most important employee. If your mom and dad are going to vote, the clerk is the most important employee. If a bad guy's out there doing bad things, guess who's the most important? The police department. They started connecting the dots. And when it's snowing really bad and we have to clear the roads, public works. And I just kind of went through that list and explained how each role and responsibility is very, very important to the organization, to in turn make sure the whole community is bigger, better, and brighter for everybody who's there and visiting or living there. So um, that is a pretty significant aspect of it. Really looking to just set the expectations, establish the lines of communication and credibility, and just be forthright, whether it's internally or externally. It is your best representation moving forward. But no, to your point, being an administrator, you are pulled in a bunch of different directions, and it is about trusting in your staff and having that regular communications that you're in the loop. I don't know everything about everything. I'll be perfectly honest about that. Part of it is being the new guy here in West Bend, but even 9+ years in Grafton, I didn't know everything that was going on all the time. However, if I needed to be brought in, I knew staff was going to coach me up really quick with really good information because they were doing a good job and I was confident in that. And so then fast forward, we could speak to residents, electeds, whomever. So really it is about that trusting, and the level of trust and communication is really what it boils down to.
I love it. Communication is such an important thing in so many ways. But like you say, it's easy to empower and give ownership away if there's a healthy stream of communication back, because that's the thing. Leaders don't want, I think that's where they get nervous, is when they don't know and then they're hoodwinked, right? And that's elected. I'm sure you have to communicate a lot with elected, because the last thing they want to do is run into someone at the grocery store and be like, why is this happening? And they're just like, I've never heard of this before. So communication, especially in local government, to all parties, whether that's elected to staff, staff to elected, electeds to community, staff to community, all of it is so important. And I love that. I want to maybe dive into real quick, when you're a village administrator in Butler, you come and take an assistant city administrator position in Mequon. Of course, that's a what'd you say, 10 times, 25,000 plus. So obviously it makes sense there to, and I think that's one of the things, though, we can get tempted to be like, oh, it feels like a step down. I was the big seat and now I'm going to the second. And we can get in our heads about the opportunities to learn and to grow. And I think, I'm sure, and maybe you'll speak to this, without that experience, you would not be as effective as you are today. Now in West Bend, what's the population? 32,000. I think this is the biggest city you've served in. So I think that sometimes I would just encourage people, again, you're not necessarily young, you can be any age serving where you're at, but you might be getting your head about what the appearance looks like. And I just stop. Who cares about what people think? Do what you think is best for you and the impact you want to have. So maybe speak to that. What was it nice to kind of get a refreshing? You kind of sometimes it's like, sometimes I hear the assistant position is the best because you don't have all the way to the electeds and whatnot, but then obviously you had the hunger. Just talk to us a bit briefly about that.
Well, a few factors actually played into my move to Mequon. One of the factors was that opportunity for growth, right? It was a larger community. I could get more in depth into the human resources aspect of things. But also to, unfortunately, in my time in Butler, being that small community, we had a pretty unfortunate situation where we had an internal investigation within the police department, had the county sheriff's department facilitating, or I facilitated that through the county sheriff's department. And then, that end report comes out. I was the guy in front of the media because I was the guy, and it was a trying time, but really that was where all you could do was own it. Yep. Stuff happened, but this is what we're going to do to chart the course forward and make improvements. And we got a new chief installed who did amazing things with that department. And so I was looking twofold. Number one, I was starting to get to the point of being burnt out. There were some difficult conversations we had at home about me being engaged at home and being intentional at home instead of all work all the time. So that started making me think about, okay, maybe I do need to step back a little bit. But also, when that opportunity presented itself and I saw that opening in Mequon, the opportunity ended up kind of being amplified, so to speak. Number one, I would be able to do that step back in the assistance role, but yet I could stay in the administration vein. I could continue to grow and learn as a professional because it was a larger organization and a very specific HR director role. So that combination of things, when I moved to Mequon, you hit the nail on the head. I had that breath of fresh air because I was shielded. I was under the administrator with the electeds and that I was shielded. So that was nice. I could get a breath of fresh air, but I also yet could still continue moving forward as a professional and growing and learning. And I had an amazing mentor in Mequon. The gentleman really brought me in and turned me loose. He had all the faith in the world in me to help with those special projects, having known that I had been an administrator and then an assistant prior to that. He had confidence in me in bringing forward good recommendations and really made sure that I was actively engaged, whether it was a major part of the budget team, whether it was working through an HR classification and compensation study, or just acting in his stead when he was away. There was that high level of confidence and mentorship he understood I needed that breath of fresh air, but he also, I think he saw that I was still readily engaged in wanting to do this. It's not like I experienced that tough time in a career that I'm done, I'm out. It wasn't that by any stretch. It was a matter of reset and go. And he really gave me that opportunity. And to this day, I am eternally grateful to Lee and everything he did, really helping me continue to move forward as a professional. So yes, that transition to Mequon was twofold, continuing to grow, but a bit of a reset for me as well.
I want to take a quick moment to pause here because there's something I hear over and over again as I talk to local government leaders from across the country. The work can often feel heavy. The expectations are high, and most days it can feel like you're carrying all that weight alone. That's why I created the Municipal Leadership Development Circle, or what we call the MLDC. The MLDC is a community of local government leaders from across North America who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of significant pressure, not just in theory, but in day-to-day practice. It's a place to think clearly, learn from others who truly understand your unique context and work, and to be reminded that you're not the only one navigating these unique challenges. If you're looking for connection, perspective, and a steady place to keep developing as a leader, I'd love for you to learn more. You can find details at HaltingWinter.com/MLDC. That's HaltingWinter.com/MLDC. Now, let's get back to the conversation. I love that you shared that, and I just want to thank you for that vulnerability there, because it's actually far more often in the stories of city managers that I interview, because it's not there are, I mean, politics, right? There's drama that happens, and I think that's one of the things for the administrator, for the manager. You become, that's why I say you are on the tightrope, and you are the lightning bolt. You're the source of where the lightning bolt hits, right? You're the diffuser in that position, and so you can be a part of something that you really have nothing to do with. You're just trying to clean up messes. I mean, I have dozens of conversations every week with city managers around the nation who are going through this. And it's why I feel so passionate about this mission of sharing these stories. I think of Intishan Chowberry in Inglewood Cliffs, I believe, New Jersey. And he almost tapped out because of, the drama he went through. And so it's so encouraging. That's why I love sharing these stories too, is you push through the adversity. You even, again, you didn't tap out and go game warden in the middle of nowhere. You said, okay, what can we do? And I think there's some humility and some wisdom, even you're still in it. You're still using your strengths and your skills, but you're wise enough to go, okay, we need some reset. And then, over a handful of years, you're healthy again, you're itching now, and now Grafton calls and you go there. Talk about what lessons did you learn? Because you're in Grafton for almost a decade. What did you learn there, being in a city for that long, which is about double the tenure of a normal city manager position? What did you learn about your leadership and about really leading a community forward over, a number of years?
Grafton, I feel I really grew up, if you will. I experienced a lot, I did a lot, but I really feel I started to come into my own. Now, I won't lie, there are days where there's a little bit of imposter syndrome to this day. Especially now a little bit being the new guy in West Bend. But at the end of it, it is just having the faith and confidence in yourself. But that all comes with experiencing what you've done. But then having that coming into Grafton and having the support of the elected body, that initial level of support there to really find my feet and get into the organization and start understanding. But then working through and building those relationships within the organization of, hey, what are we doing now? Does it make sense? Okay, cool. Does it not make sense? Well, what can we do to tweak it? What can we do to make some changes? I don't want to change for change sake, but how can we continue to improve? So having that tenure and making earning that respect and building those relationships, you really could start digging into the operations and really improving as an organization. And in my tenure, there was some retirements and other attrition. So it was a management team that towards the tail end, second half of my tenure, that was a management team more or less I had built. And so there was a lot of shared vision and a lot of understanding of what each other's expectations were. Um, but the beauty of it is, it was a lot of different perspectives. The example I gave earlier of the community development director who actively engaged employee, she's a rock star employee. Had this conversation, moved her into the role of community development director and assistant village administrator. Um, she carries a different perspective than I do. I'm more of, okay, we can incrementally move forward. It's okay, where she's very much structured. We're going to do this in a sequence where as a good administrator, well, I want to get over there. How do I get over there? Well, let's just figure it out as we go. Sometimes you have to do that. And so that was a great check and balance and a great dynamic. And then other folks within the management team understood where I was coming from. And it was always just a constant and regular conversation and discussion that I was able to figure out another core concept of mine as an administrator, where I ask for full candor of my management team, because as an administrator, I can dream up projects, policies, what have you, but I need that check and balance. Is it functional? Does it make sense for our organization? Does it make sense for our community? It's not just about me. It is about getting that shared vision and moving forward. So I want and I ask and I request, I want that check and balance. Help me, help us move forward. And that was a great dynamic that we had built in Grafton over time. We saw some great things in the community with some new developments. I actually ended up using a West Bend model to achieve a public-private partnership to build a new park shelter. We went from a open air uh, pavilion kind of situation to a full-on masonry year-round rental amenity that can be used by the community for decades, for generations, probably. But so it is about finding that confidence, which comes in time, and then just having that trust in yourself. And it's not going to be there every day. I'll be 100% honest with that. It's not going to be there every day, but you just keep looking to move forward and rely on those relationships and that communication.
I love that. Such a good point. Again, I know that there are some people wired, and their whole kind of mission and gift is to come into a place as a city manager and kind of be a change agent. And it's really about just them in that moment. But there is something beautiful about being able to be in a place for longer than just a couple of years. And because I think that, like you just said, it's hard to build a team and row together in that short amount of time. I think of Andy and Bayside. I mean, decades being able to really craft not just a vision, but multiple. I think that's the other thing about a municipality is you are working in decades and generations, right? The projects you do take so much time at times. And so when you have longevity, you're able to see those through. You're able to, again, really see the impact from front to finish of some really cool things. Let's dive into West Bend as we kind of wrap. I want to be mindful of your time. Tell us about West Bend for the national audience. I believe this is about 40 miles north of Milwaukee. It's about 32,000 people. You correct me now and tell me what's going on in West Bend. What are you excited about? Maybe what are some of the challenges? Give us a little scope into your life.
So West Bend is kind of that midway point between Milwaukee metropolitan area and the Fox Valley, which would be Appleton, Oshkosh, Needham, and Asheville, Fond du Lac. So it's kind of that midway point there. And as the stories go, got its name from it was a westerly bend in the Milwaukee River, West Bend, and that's kind of that halfway point, and really grew from there as a stopping point. But the community over time really was utilized rail and the river as far as building out industry. So really a manufacturing hub. And the interesting part and dynamic of West Bend is that a lot of many of those initial industries are still here. And if the industry themselves aren't here, the families who were associated with them are still here. So there's a lot of really deep rooted history within this community that, frankly, you can't ignore. It needs to be and is a part of day to day conversations, policy considerations, event considerations, development considerations. So that is a neat dynamic. In Grafton, my previous community, that was a bit diluted by the time I had gotten there. And so, yes, you understood the history was there, but it didn't play as big of a role as it does here in West Bend. West Bend is, not to be cliche, a big enough city, but really that small town feel where it has been amazingly welcoming for me as the new guy coming in, whether I'm speaking to the local Rotary Club or at the tree lighting ceremony downtown. Folks are amazingly friendly and welcoming to me as their new administrator. And yeah, we have a little bit of everything. We have commercial, we have industrial, we have residential. Right now, we're actually seeing a boost in residential activity, which frankly, the city hadn't seen in the better part of a decade. So we're shifting gears, not only from a development and inspection standpoint, but what are our governing policies with regards to residential development? And it is about being willing to have that flexibility and making the community better. But West Bend as a community is absolutely amazing. I couldn't ask for better, walking into better partnerships, whether it's the school district, the downtown business district, the Chamber of Commerce, the local social clubs, being the Kiwanis or the Rotary, just great folks all the way around and really receptive. But that will come back, and I keep beating this drum. It comes back to building those relationships and being willing to have that communication. I never saw myself as a corner office executive type. So it is about getting out and being a part of the community, having the conversations and being open to just the communication side of things.
So good. I think it's one of the things about local government is it's this tension, right? Of you have the everyday essential services that you're providing. You're trying to plan and kind of stay on a road of flourishing, or else you know if you. I always say if something's not growing, it's dying. So you've got to be kind of planning what's ahead. But then you also the third thing is you got to you have to be flexible and pliable to what's happening. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, people are moving here. We need houses all of a sudden. Or I'm sure that could change on a dime tomorrow and be like, all of a sudden, all it takes is one industry that goes, we want to be there. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, what are we missing out on? We better be there too. And it's just an interesting local government never, it's just so active. And you just kind of like, yes, there's things that are steady, but there's also so many cool things to be a part of as you continue to lead towards human flourishing.
And there's so many nuances to it too, especially like here in West Bend. As I mentioned, there are some long, well-grounded families that have been here for generations. Then we have an influx of new families, and there's that push, balancing that push-pull of newer families. What are they expecting and wanting and needing for amenities or programming or what have you, versus the folks that have been here a good long time, generations. I mean, well-established families. What are their expectations of what is the city going to provide for services or amenities or programming? And it's just that interesting dynamic and push pull where that flexibility is absolutely needed. I appreciate you mentioning that, because any organization, whether you're Butler, Miles Square, hemmed in, built out, or West Bend, we're on the open. We have room to grow. It is about that being responsive and having and being willing to be that having that flexibility to adjust, because things change, right? The only constant is change, as the saying goes. And I think it's important that you got to be willing to adapt to that. Stick to your principles, absolutely, but there is that level of change that you need to be willing to accept.
And it is a job that, again, it's centered on people. You're providing services for people, and you're, again, back from the very beginning of your experience, you get the highs and the lows. You get the highs of, man, we're doing such good things, and you see the impact you're doing, but then you get those tensions, right? You get the person who's been there for 50, family's been there for 5 generations and goes, we don't need a Target, Target's, why can't you just have Jack's Mercantile? We had a little Jack's Mercantile in our little farm town when I grew up, and you'd walk in there and they didn't have anything except, the random, things a little mercantile has. But someone comes in who's never, they don't know Jack's Mercantile. They know Target. They want all that they're familiar with and comfortable with. And so how do you lead both those people into community environments? Such a cool job. Maybe I'll end with this. You've mentioned these themes throughout your story of the tension of the position and how a city never shuts off, and it has both really good moments and really challenging moments. My big thing is work-life balance. I think balance is BS. There's no such thing as balance. There is intention. How does Jesse live intentionally, both to pour into his wife? Do you have kids? Do you have kids?
Two boys.
Two
Yep.
boys. There it is. How do you make sure? I say there's more. Why I don't like work-life balance is there's more than two aspects of life. You have your profession and all that has. You have relationships and all kinds of relationships, but you also have a personal. And I think that's the danger of what I call servant leadership. The dark side of servant leadership is then you feel incredible shame if you try to take care of yourself, because it's like, oh, well, I'll do everything for anyone else, but I'll always be the last one to ask for help for myself. And my mission is not only to share your guys' story, but also to make sure that you have someone in your corner going, remember to take care of yourself, because if you don't have anything in your cup, you're not going to pour out anything of value. So what does that look like? What's the challenge of that? And do you have any insights on how you've been able to wrestle with that over your career?
You know what you just said, Seth, really hit close to home. I think back to, thankfully, I always try to find a silver lining or a win, whatever the situation may be. What are you taking away from it? When I went through that whole investigation of the police department issue in Butler, and that was some time ago now, but what I took away from that is, yeah, you do have to take care of yourself, because there is only so much you can give, and appreciate your support network. Because quite frankly, as I'm going through that, I'm just thinking, what do I have to do to solve this problem? What do I have to do? And it took my wife pulling me aside and saying, hey, we got to have a chat here. I need you to be using your words, and I feel strongly that it is a spot on observation. Work life balance, not a thing, but being intentional when you have that time away from the office. I love that. That is epic, by the way. It was about, hey, you have a role and responsibility here in this household, and I need you back. Is basically what the tone of the conversation was, and just taking away of learning that lesson about trusting your support network, enabling that support network, appreciating that support network, um, but then also being willing to step away. Now, I will 100% say, and my wife will back me up on this, I'm not great at it. I was the guy, I was walking around Disney World. I was kind of lagging behind the family, checking my emails on my phone. So, yeah, I'm not great at it. I won't say that. But it is about a certain level of, yep, you do have to know when, step away, take that breath, take care of yourself. And because you can't serve the community at your best if you're not the best version of yourself. And that best version of yourself, as you said, really relies on you stepping away and doing something different. For me, my stepping away is I love, being a part of my boys growing up. I coach some little league, just attending their sporting events now when I get time. So being an administrator, it's a ton of time on the phone, sending emails, a lot of paperwork. I have a small wood shop at home. I like to build some things. So I see something tangible when I'm doing it, or what I've done rather. That is a version of stepping away, and it is just kind of that reset. And that's huge. But trust, respect, and utilize that support network, because yes, there are going to be some tough days in this job, but at the same time, this job can be pretty epic and really rewarding. So, yeah, it's been a blast of a career path. I'm really happy. I've gone this way, and I appreciate the growth I've experienced, and I just love everything about it. It just, yeah, I could kind of gush on and on, but that's the
So
long and short of it.
it's so good. Maybe two things that come to mind. The first is you said something there with your woodworking shop. And I think there's a good takeaway for someone who goes, man, I just don't know how to shut it off. I always heard the adage of if you work with your head, you got to relax with your hands, and if you work with your hands, you have to relax with your head. So a lot of construction workers will read, and just kind of Whereas I think some of city managers, administrators, you're so in the weeds of emails and communication that again to just get to the shop and to let you close the door, you put on some tunes, and you work with your hands. And like there's something else you just said there that's beautiful. Sometimes a lot of the work you do, it takes so long, and you could be at a place for 10 years and still only be in the middle or the beginning of a project, the middle of a project, or maybe the end of a project. You might not see anything that you actually birth come to pass. And so the ability to do something in your private life that has some completion, that has some control, maybe some finality, there's some really beautiful things there. And my last thing I'll wrap with is this is, back when you first started land use administration and planning, and you thought, what have I got myself into? I think about us Gen Xers. We didn't have the pleasure of going to Chat GPT and asking for help. We had to figure it out right on our own. We had to go to hunt down an AOL CD with 500 hours on it and hope that it would give us, some internet to go. I don't know, even if Google, I think it was Ask Jeeves back then. But yeah, well, what a great story, Jesse. Love it.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to just have a chat, about my path. That's really kind of a neat thing, because I'm horrible about telling my story. I struggle with the notion of interviews or going through that. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. And if it serves to light a fire for somebody or give a little bit of inspiration for somebody that you don't have to take that direct path, happy to help out, and, just appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
I look forward to meeting you in person in just a few weeks out at the WCMA Winter Conference. And if you're in Wisconsin, there it is, if I could talk, I hope to see you out there. Make sure you're there. Make sure you travel through the snow, get on your snowmobile or your caribou, and join us. But thank you, Jesse. Incredible insights. Thank you for sharing your life, your leadership journey. Just some great takeaways today.
You bet. Thank you very much.
The stories we share here on the Halting Winter podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.